The iPad Pro is my go-to device for the things that I do every day, be it browsing the web, watching videos, or productivity and research when I'm making these videos. For me, it is the ultimate all-in-one one I need, a screen that is bigger than my phone, or something that is more personal and hands-on than my MacBook Pro. I've had the M2 since release. It is still the newest Pro, even though it's coming up to almost a year and a half old. But how is it holding up, and what have I learned from using it, and is it still worth it in 2024? This is my long-term review. What's up guys, my name is Jack, I'm at Tech Videos. It has been a hot minute since this bad boy dropped. The M2 iPad Pro is the 6th generation in the Pro lineup. And it looks pretty much identical to the M1 iPad Pro that came before it, and very similar to the 3rd and 4th gens. Which is not a bad thing. I mean, it is a solid design. This is the larger 12.9 inch model. I've always gone for the bigger screen. I really like the flat back and sides. It is easy to hold. The big display pushes right into the corners, blending into the bezels. I mostly use it around the house to browse the web or watch some videos on YouTube, or even in the kitchen when I'm trying to follow a recipe. But I will take it out and about if I want to do some work on the go. It's held up really well, and I don't have any noticeable bumps or scratches on it. I don't use a screen protector either, and there are no scratches on the display. Majority of the time, I actually keep it in the Magic Keyboard, so that is giving it some protection. Even though the sides are exposed, it is still mark-free. At home, I'll sometimes use it with the Lab 22 stand. Really cool stand from Moment and Seradici. It has a lot of adjustability when working. You can bring it right down to desk level, and it rotates into portrait, which is nice when working on like a long document or something. But I don't have a trackpad for it, and I much prefer a trackpad with all of the gestures over a mouse, so most of the time I do just use it in the Magic Keyboard, which I do really like. I feel like I can be a lot more productive with the iPad when using it with access to the keyboard shortcuts, and it makes the iPad feel a lot more like a laptop. It's easy to type on with the full-size keys, it's backlit, and all powered through the pins on the back of the iPad, so I've never had to think about charging it. But there are two things that I would change about it. Number one is give it a row of function keys. This first came out during the dark times of the MacBook Pro not having any, but since then we have changed course and they came back, so please let's just add some to the Magic Keyboard. And two, I would like to see the trackpad be made just a little bit bigger. I do find it a bit cramped for the gestures, but maybe that's just me and my massive hands. I do like how the iPad kind of looks like it's just floating above the keyboard with the cantilever design, but it feels like it might just be pushing everything up towards the front of the keyboard, meaning that there is less space for a function row and a bigger trackpad. So it might need a bit of a redesign to accommodate for features like those. Now, the iPad is all about that big display, that big canvas that can turn into whatever you need, be it for drawing, browsing the web, or just watching video. And the display on the M2 is fantastic. It's bright, colours are vivid, they look gorgeous, and text and images look sharp and crisp with the high resolution. For me, it is the best display on any iPad, most of all because it has a really high contrast ratio. All of Apple's other models, including the 11-inch Pro, use LCD displays. But here it's different. The 12.9 inch uses mini LED, where the backlight is divided into multiple smaller zones, allowing for a lot more control over the backlighting, and overall just deeper blacks and improved contrast. But here's the thing, it is not as precise as OLED, so you might notice a sort of slight glow or hazing on the screen, maybe around a bright character in a film scene, or white text on a black background. I know for some people that can be really distracting, but it's just not been that big of a deal for me. And honestly, I can only really see it when the screen is really bright. So I've got no regrets going for the larger display, but I would like to see OLED come to the iPad Pro. I've always gone for that larger display. I just like having the extra screen space. And you know what? I would totally go for an even bigger one if they made it. Maybe like a 14 or a 15 inch, but I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. For SDR content, we're looking at 600 nits of brightness, nice and bright for most daily content, or up to 1600 nits for HDR. And this display just looks amazing watching HDR films. The colors look incredible. With ProMotion, scrolling and moving around the OS looks incredibly smooth at 120 Hz. I never feel like it slows down or lags. It actually dynamically changes the refresh rate, so when you're not moving on like a web page, it dials the refresh rate down to preserve the battery life, and then ramps it up again when needed. It's seamless. But all of this stuff actually carries over from the M1 iPad Pro. Something new they added to the M2 is Apple Pencil Hover. As you hover the pencil over apps and icons on the display, they kind of pop out and grow, and you get a preview of where your brush or pen stroke is going to be when drawing. It really makes it a lot easier to see and to know what's going to happen when you touch the display. It even adapts to the angle of the pencil when you tilt it. Third-party apps can use it too. Photomator uses it to show filter previews as you hover over them, speeding up the whole process when choosing. Something that is missing from the pencil though is Find My support. If there is one thing I'd add to it, it would be the ability to track this thing in the Find My app. The magnets on the iPad are pretty strong, but I have knocked the pencil off a couple of times moving around the house, and then I've just had no idea where to find it again. So yeah, Apple, please just stick an AirTag in it. On the performance, the M2 chip is still just a beast. I've had no problems with it. It is super fast opening apps and switching between them, which is no surprise. I mean, this is the same M2 chip that you can find in the MacBook Air. So browsing the web, checking emails, making notes, it handles that all just fine. Even more intensive things like gaming, editing photos, or batch editing a load at once, there just aren't any hiccups. I recently did a video all about the apps that I use on my iPad, so I'll link to that below if you're interested. Just to know, I have the 2TB model, which comes with 16 gigs of RAM. The M2 chip has a 15% faster CPU and a 40% GPU performance boost over the M1. And yet, I never really feel like I'm pushing the chip anywhere near to its limit. The iPad Pro still just kind of feels held back by iPad OS. Now, since release, Apple has finally brought a couple of their Pro apps to the iPad with Logic and Final Cut, which I've been waiting for ages. It just seems like a no-brainer to stick Final Cut on this thing to really show off what it can do. The iPad is more than capable with the M2 chip. Editing in 4K, it just flies. But it is just not really the same as its macOS counterpart. In fact, it kind of feels like a totally different app. I have used it to edit some vertical video, which for the most part has been fine. It takes a bit of getting used to the new UI, but I just don't think I could edit a full long-form video with the app as it currently stands. There's no support for editing off an external drive. Everything, all your footage, has to be on the iPad. It has vector scopes, but no proper color grading with color wheels or hue saturation curves. There's no way to use custom titles or plugins, but that is meant to be coming, so I am looking forward to that. And you can start a project on the iPad and move it to the Mac, but that is just a one-way trip. There's no way to bring it back to the iPad and continue working, presumably because there's just so many features that are missing between the two versions. But this is a first release, and Apple are charging a subscription for the app, so hopefully they continue to improve it and bring it closer to the Mac version, to the point where they both work seamlessly together. Aside from that, the M2 chip feels fine. I'm pretty sure anyone watching with an M1 would say the same as well. These Apple Silicon chips just handle whatever you throw at them on the iPad. The next gen will probably get an M3. I just hope that Apple will actually take advantage of all that power. Since release with iPadOS 17, we got some updates to external display support. And this is something that I've been wanting to try out since I got my studio display and this new setup. So now in Stage Manager, you can drag around the windows pretty much wherever you want, which is so much better. They don't just snap to predefined positions like before. And I quite like these sort of workspaces and using the iPad with these multiple windows. It makes the iPad feel way more powerful when multitasking across different apps. But there are still a few weird quirks. It does feel a bit wonky at times, like opening Control Center on the display opens it on the iPad screen for some reason. You can't change the external display brightness here. You have to go into settings and navigate through a bunch of different menus. We're still limited to 4 apps per screen, which just kind of feels arbitrary. The MacBook Air has the same M2 chip and can have as many open as you want. Some apps, usually games, just don't work when opened on the display. I have to open them on the iPad first and then move them over, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Some apps don't support full screen, which is kind of on developers, but even Apple's own app like Final Cut are stuck in this window. It feels like there is a lot of wasted space. And also, there's no support for clamshell mode. The iPad screen has to be on, or the external display just switches off. It's like Apple doesn't want you to forget that you're actually using an iPad. It is a step in the right direction, but there are definitely some things left to iron out. On the cameras, I'd say I'd use the front camera the most, mainly for FaceTime. This has center stage, which actually means it's an ultra-wide camera which crops in and then tracks you around the room as you move about. Pretty cool. Although it has freaked out a couple of my friends when it started following me. My only gripe with it is the camera is on the short side. So using the iPad in landscape, which I do most of the time, you end up with a bit of an awkward angle on the side of your face. It is not a good look. It has moved up top to the long side on the 10th Gen iPad Pro, where it should be, so I think it's safe to assume that the same will happen with the next Pro. I hardly ever use the rear cameras, they're just there for scanning documents. The cameras themselves aren't bad, so if you really need to take a photo, then you can, but your phone is going to do a much better job. But what has come in useful is the LiDAR scanner. I've just redone my setup in here with new furniture and a new desk, links below if you want to check that out. And with apps like Room Scan, you can use LiDAR to scan the room and give you, some rough measurements. I'm sure it's not exact, but it gives you a good idea. The IKEA app and even the Amazon app both let you place things in augmented reality to see how they'll look in your room. It even does like a pretty good job at cutting things out, and it's really useful to have on this big display. And that's mainly what I've been using the cameras for as of late. I've got no complaints with battery life. This thing lasts me a good 6 to 8 hours a day, depending on what I'm doing, sometimes even longer if I am only doing some light work. Health-wise, Coconut Battery tells me that I'm at 265 cycles, and it's reporting the battery health at just over 88%. So a bit of a drop, but to be honest, it is what I'd expect after about 16 months, and I don't think that's bad considering I've been using this thing literally every day. And I am still getting all-day battery life, which is all that matters. Almost a year and a half later, the M2 iPad Pro is still my favourite all-round device. I love using it for web browsing, watching videos, casual gaming, but it also delivers as a powerful tool for productivity when I'm planning videos or taking notes. The M2 chip is crazy powerful. The hardware on the Pro line has been top-notch for the last few generations, but it still feels like it's being held back by iPad OS. External display support and Pro apps like Final Cut are steps in the right direction, and I hope that we see those expanded on in future to address some of their quirks and missing features. The M2 iPad Pro has a desktop class chip, and yet it still feels like it's running watered down iPad apps. Is it still worth buying an M2 now? I'm going to say no. Apple didn't release a single iPad in 2023 last year. The whole lineup is due a refresh, including the Pros, which could happen in the next month or so if the rumours are correct, with potential for some big changes to the design. So unless you really need an iPad Pro right now, it might just be worth waiting a few more weeks to see what the next generation offers, or to pick this one up if you find like a decent price drop. I'm looking forward to see what comes next though. Let me know in the comments what you think of the M2 or what you change about it. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe and hit the bell to see more tech videos from me. I am coming up on 20k subscribers, so if you want to help me out, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.